win this election.
The left-wing hate brigade at it again, as the man in charge of the Democrats takes a vicious swipe at the President of the United States and the GOP. And that's not all. The American Conservative Union chair is shouted down while trying to defend the administration.
Because you're uncomfortable. You're uncomfortable. You are uncomfortable at being spoken to by someone who doesn't agree with you and recognize that you don't know what you're talking about.
I've had it with the crybabies, and I've got a prediction to make. It's tonight's opening statement. Plus,
the Constitution protects all those in our country, documented and undocumented.
Defying the president. Sanctuary mayors take aim at not only the White House, but even police, like Sheriff Tom Hodgson.
Why is it that we're held to a higher standard and the people who are violating the laws coming in illegally are not held to those same standards?
Tonight, the sheriff strikes back. It's a packed justice, and we're ready to roll.
Hello and welcome to Justice. I'm Judge Jeanine Pirro. Thanks for being with us tonight. Counselor to the President, Kellyanne Conway, is here in a moment. But first, my opening statement and my prediction. Friday, Tom Perez, the newly anointed chair of the DNC, you know, the party that lost the White House, the Senate, and the House of Representatives, called the 45th president of the United States a bully and someone who didn't really win the election. In fact, Perez was a bit more exorcised in his rant. Take a listen.
We have a bully in Washington in the White House. Donald Trump, you don't stand for our values. That's what they said. Donald Trump, you didn't win this election. Donald Trump, that romance you have with Putin, it's not going to do you any good. Donald Trump, we will resist.
Don't stand for our values? Pray tell, Perez, what are our values and what is it that you want us to resist? Law and order, the letter of the law, the Constitution, the plenary powers of the president to protect Americans? I have a prediction to make. While the left acts like children who just can't get over the fact that Hillary lost the election and simply won't stop their abusive invectives against the man who was constitutionally elected, yes, that's what I said, constitutionally elected, calling him not legitimate and his cabinet scumbags, that man is doing the job we hired him to do. He is building up and modernizing the military as well as strengthening law enforcement. With General John Kelly, he is ridding this country of some of the most dangerous elements who simply don't belong here and weren't allowed here in the first place, like MS-13, illegal gang members who swear an oath to kill others, the ones the liberal lefty mayors want to keep here, risking the safety of their own law-abiding American citizens. And with General James Mattis, the military is poised to destroy those cockroaches known as ISIS in Iraq and Syria, just as President Trump promised. Imagine a president who not only does what he says, but can actually figure out what the end goal is, as opposed to President Obama, whose feckless foreign policy was to have no strategy and who graduated to contain ISIS and then decides to degrade and destroy them, all of which, of course, never happened. And all the while, these namby-pamby wusses obsessing that Russia interfered with our election and our democracy. But these bozos still haven't figured out what exactly Russia did. But they must have done something because Queen Hillary should have been coronated. Instead of admitting that the woman was so desperate for power that she sets up a private server to both collect money and run the government, and you know the rest. And by the way, the Russians didn't write her emails, the ones that sunk her. She did. And by the way, the Russians didn't give Hillary the questions before the CNN debate. Donna Brazile did. And nobody seems to care or want to investigate that Barack Obama danced with the devil in Tehran, whose people cut off our heads because we're infidels, the ones who yell death to America, the ones he gave $150 billion to and another $400 million that they thought they could quietly get away with. So while they moan and groan about blowing up the White House in March and shout down the people on the right and literally try to suppress our free speech by burning down our buildings, our president is doing what we hired him to do. He's building up the military. He's dealing with the greatest historical threat that confronts America today, the threat of North Korea, backed by China. North Korea with Kim Jong-un at its head, whose relatives all fear walking over a bridge in case it opens up and the piranhas end up eating them, and who by all accounts is as unbalanced as Barack Obama's budget. And so my prediction? If and when the clash of the titans does come, these wimps, the one who will never give up their airplane seat for someone in the military, the ones who demand that they speak and shout you down so you can't, and who will never pay the price to speak, will be the first to pee in their pants and run under their desks, and will thank their lucky stars that President Donald J. Trump and his generals had the guts and the instincts to put on their big boy pants every morning and face the reality of the real danger that is confronting America today. And that's my open. Tell me what you think on my Facebook page or Twitter, hashtag Judge Jeanine. And joining me now is Counselor to the President of the United States, Kellyanne Conway. All right, Kellyanne, am I right, am I wrong, or somewhere in the middle?
Well, you certainly are high energy. That is a compliment in the Trump administration. Jeanine, I think you hit on something very important. If you look at the Russian obsession, these conclusions in search of evidence, it's as if those machines that develop the chyrons, the lower thirds on other networks, are broken. I mean, they say the same thing show after show, day after day. And what's happening is the mainstream media are making Americans suffer from information underload on all the great things the president is doing to create jobs, to lift the yoke of these trade abuses and cheaters, to start a commission this week on opioid abuse, which is an epidemic. It's quadrupled since 1999. It's the leading cause of accidental deaths. And I think with Jared Kushner's Office of American Innovation, coupled with this opioid commission led by Governor Christie, real things are going to happen here. This week you had Women Empowerment, a panel with our female cabinet secretaries, our amazing, very popular, elegant, brilliant First Lady who speaks 5 languages. I speak 1. She went to the State Department and gave a beautiful speech and gave out awards. The president unleashed energy production, clean coal, oil, natural gas. He's unleashing all these, he's creating jobs, he's doing all these things that don't get covered, bilateral meetings and phone calls, and they don't get covered on the altar of what you said, the R word.
And I still don't know what Russia has done. I still don't know. But what I do know, Bill Clinton made a lot of money giving speeches while uranium was sold. 20% of our uranium is owned by Russia, and Hillary and Bill were in the middle of that.
And by the way, those are the facts. We talked an awful lot about that during the campaign, very often during the Trump campaign and transition. Nobody cared. Very few people they said, yeah, we know that, but what? Those are actually facts. These are conclusions in search of evidence. And my thing, I know people talk about fake news and biased media, etc. It's not just unfair coverage. That's one thing. And I think Americans are smart enough to see if the president is being treated fairly or unfairly in the coverage. It's everything that doesn't get covered. It's the incomplete coverage, because this president will be judged by metrics that we saw just yesterday. The National Association of Manufacturers came out with their new study, a 20-year high in confidence and optimism among manufacturers. Those are the job creators. The confidence number is 93.3%. 1 year ago, 56.6%. That's not an accounting error. That's not tinkering at the edges. That's a huge jump. Either. That's jumping by 25%. And the head of NAM, Jay Timmons, said that 86% or so of his members thinks the country is headed in the right track. On the right track. Why? And he said to the president and others in attendance, because we know you're investing in infrastructure, you're investing in energy, that made in the USA, energy is under our feet and off our shores. Let's start developing it here. And then he also said, because we know you're going to get tax reform and health care reform done.
What is next, Kellyanne? After health care, and that mess, what is next? Is it infrastructure, or is it going to be the tax bill?
So tax policy started this week, and the president has committed to giving middle-class families tax relief. middle-class Americans tax relief, and lowering the burden, the tax burden on our job creators so that they can retain and attract American workers here. You know, and even the trade yesterday, you say what's next. You look at what happened later in the day yesterday with trade, that the president wants to crack down on cheaters and abusers. But this is a man who, as a candidate, took the issue of trade, Jeanine, which was at 1% in the polls. It wasn't even included in some polls on what's the most important issue facing the country. He took trade and he coupled it with illegal immigration. And he changed the entire conversation from what's fair to the illegal immigrant to what's fair to the American worker. And he did that with trade also. When he went around this country, he would see the shuttered factories. He would talk to the out-of-work men and women across this country. And that also goes to trade. He just says, look, of course we're going to have trade. We're going to have bilateral agreements, but the America's not always going to get screwed. They're going to be more fair to America, her interests, her allies, and her workers.
I go all over this country, Kellyanne, as you do. And I hear from people all the time who say, you know, we don't really care about this Russian thing. When are we getting jobs? When are we getting tax cuts? When is, you know, Obamacare going to be repealed? And what do we say to them?
We say to them, you're absolutely right. This is how his presidency will be judged also. And this is the way it is being judged by many Americans, by the way. It's a big country out there with tens of millions of Americans who want him and this country to succeed. When they open up their 401k statement, when they go to buy or sell their home, when they see that the home builders confidence index is the highest it's been in 12 years. These numbers don't lie. When they see the consumer confidence, people want to spend their money. They feel good about investing again, about spending their money again. That's how he'll be judged. Was housing affordable? Is health care affordable and sustainable? Was my tax burden reduced so that my disposable income was higher? On his education agenda, do I as a parent have more say in where my child goes to school and what is taught there? Or is he and she, or he or she still beholden to our zip code? You know, his Secretary of Education, Betsy DeVos, talked about that just this week. Linda McMahon, Seema Verna, Elaine Chao, Nikki Haley. This man surrounds himself with these incredibly accomplished, powerful women who are there to make a difference.
Including my first guest tonight,
I'm talking about the cabinet.
Kellyanne, with a lot of energy herself. Kellyanne Conway, thanks so much for being with us. And you still have a lot of energy too, Kellyanne. You travel a lot as well. All right, author and columnist Mark Stein is still on deck tonight. But next, my sanctuary city mayors flouting the law, the president and the police. Sheriff Tom Hodgson is next to respond to a personal attack by one of those mayors against him. And later,
I don't care what color you are, and I have respect for you.
I care what color you are because it's important, because our differences are also part of this country.
Allow me to speak.
Our old friend Conservative Union Chair Matt Schlapp with a testy exchange on TV while trying to defend the Trump administration is left out to silence the right. Matt's here to talk about it as justice rolls on. Welcome back to Justice. Sanctuary city mayors standing in defiance of the White House when it comes to keeping you safe. Joining me now is a man who knows something about keeping people safe, Bristol County, Massachusetts Sheriff Tom Hodgson. All right, Tom, you've been on the show many times, and I've got to tell you, I was infuriated when I saw this Facebook posting, and I think we may have it here, where this mayor says, Joe Curtatone says, so officials like Hodgson should feel free to keep blowing hot air. By all means, expose yourself as a sort of jackbooted thug who wants to jail your political opponents for made-up offenses. What do you have to say to that, Sheriff?
Well, that's the kind of thing that you would expect out of someone that wants to divert attention away from the fact that he's actually trying to harbor and conceal people within his own community in violation of federal law. And I have to tell you, I've never owned a pair of jack boots, and I think he referred to me as a jackbooted thug. Look, those the kind of rhetoric that you'll see from people who really are not in concert with what the American people want. We want to be safe. They want the laws enforced in our nation, and he's violating them.
Look. To me, this man is despicable. He is a despicable human being. He took an oath of office to protect the citizens. And what he's doing is he's opening up the door to aliens who are criminals and not letting their fellow brothers and sisters in law enforcement know when these aliens are being released and need to be deported. So that's what I think of him. What do we do to someone like him?
Well, look, any elected official that is found to be harboring or concealing anyone through their sanctuary policies the federal government needs to issue arrest warrants on them, just like the federal government would on any of their constituents who did the same thing. We can't have elected officials like Mayor Coutatone and others deciding whether or not they're going to follow federal law depending on how much of it they like or don't. We're a country of laws. They took an oath to uphold them. I took an oath to enforce them. And this mayor is not somebody that should be forgiven of the consequences that the rest of us would have if we had violated the federal law.
You know, Sheriff, look, I know what you do for a living. You know what I do for a living. I did this for 30 years. I cannot believe that we are living in America where the mayors are actually out there saying, we don't want you to listen to the federal government or to anyone in law enforcement, and we want to protect people who are criminals. And I'm not talking about the person who's cleaning someone's house. I could care less. We have MS-13, the worst of the worst, the people who kill as a part of their initiation, and mayors who are stupid enough to say they need to be defended and not American citizens. I think it's time to do something about getting these mayors out of office.
Well, Judge, look, I think most of the American people get it, and they recognize that they don't expect their elected officials to be, creating these sanctuary cities that are going to protect the lawbreakers, the illegals who are here, who are potentially at some point or another going to hurt them if they aren't already having criminal records when they come in, at the expense of the people that they were elected to represent and protect. The fundamental responsibility of government is to make sure that the people in our communities, both the citizens and legal residents, are safe. I don't know how, as you said, any elected official can feel comfortable saying, I'm not going to abide by the federal law. And what example is that to our children? What example is that to the people in the community? If you're a leader and you're saying we're not going to abide by law?
And you know what, Sheriff? My next guests are two people who I wish could confront this mayor and give him an idea of what pain is like when people believe what he believes. Sheriff Hodgson, thanks so much for being with us. So many girls look forward to their sweet 16, a coming of age, a birthday. That's a special time for every teenager and her parents. But Nisa Micken's life was violently cut short the day before that 16th birthday, thanks to a gang of illegal immigrants in New York, MS-13 gang members that I've been talking to you about. Joining me now is Nisa's still grieving parents, who I thank for being here, Robert Mickens and Elizabeth Alvarado. There's nothing that I can say. I thank you for being here. America weeps with you. And please know, not for 1 minute does America think that what the mayor and people like him think is the right way to think. But tell us about Nisa. Tell us what happened to her.
Nisa was violently attacked by gangs. September 13th, the eve before her Sweet 16. She was walking with one of her friends back to their friend's house, and they had spotted them and said, you know what, let's go ahead and get them.
Okay, my understanding is that Nisa was friends with a young girl from Long Island named Kayla. They'd been friends since the 3rd grade.
Yes.
And Kayla had kind of a little back and forth with one of those MS-13 gang bangers on social media. Nothing serious. But your daughter Nisa, because she was friends with Kayla.
They were best friends.
They were best friends. And Nisa got caught up in it.
Yeah.
Because she was walking with Kayla, and there was they don't call it a hit, a green light? Is that what they call it?
Whatever term that they use nowadays, who knows if it's green light, red light.
How did you find it? Did you know there was even an issue? Did you?
We didn't know there was an issue.
We found out afterwards.
Yeah.
After we finally read the indictment. That's when we found out. We're like, wow. It's sad that 2 young girls' lives had to be taken. They're precious young girls, regardless if it was something dealing with social media. If you can't take what people say, then maybe you should not be on social media.
How do you feel about the fact that there are now 4 illegals charged with the murder of your daughter and her best friend? Your daughter done nothing, but she was in the wrong place.
Yeah.
They were beaten to death with baseball bats, machete as well. How do you feel that they were in this country?
Well, the fact that they were undocumented is not right, because there is people who are immigrants who try to make a better living for themselves. Only thing that they're really doing is making it hard for the next group of people who really do want that better life. And it's sad because there's other Salvadorians who are very nice people who will give their shirt off your back to you, but it messes it up for the good ones. It's, you know, it happens with a lot of races. You have people who make the wrong decisions, and it makes other people look bad.
This particular gang, though, the MS-13 gang, is a gang that part of its initiation is to murder someone. You know that?
Yes.
When they came across the border in 2014, there was a lot of objection, but everyone said, we got to let them in. Should they be let in?
Only if their intentions are for a better life. That's the thing I don't get. You're leaving where you're coming from that is plagued with violence. You're supposed to come here for a better way of life, and you continue to do the same things that you just left from? That makes no sense to me.
What would you say to them?
Why? Why my daughter? Why did she have to pay the price?
You had planned for her birthday.
Yes.
You had gifts for her?
Yeah.
What did you do with them?
I opened up her birthday gift that his aunt gave her. And I opened it up. It was a necklace and a bracelet. And I wore it on her birthday.
It's not easy. Because the only thing she wanted to do was hang out with a friend the day before her birthday. I was like, all right, go ahead. I know where you're going to be at. The parents are nice. They love having you there, so there's not a problem with having you there. So we let her go, you know, because she's a good girl. It doesn't make sense to keep a good girl locked in a house.
All she wanted to do is just play ball, basketball. That's it.
I understand that you wear her sneakers.
Yes.
Elizabeth and Robert, our thoughts are with you. God bless you. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having us tonight.
We're going to follow. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
CPAC Chairman Matt Slapp on deck tonight. And next, the panel is primed and ready to go. Former Bush advisor Brad Blakeman and former Charles Schumer advisor Chris Hahn is next. Stay with us. Welcome back to Justice. Author and columnist Mark Steyn is here this half hour, as well as CPAC Chairman Matt Slapp. But now it's time for the panel. And they're in Washington, and I'm in New York. Former advisor to President George W. Bush, Brad Blakeman, and in New York, former Chuck Schumer advisor, syndicated talk show host Chris Hahn. Thanks, guys, for being here. All right.
Pleasure.
All right. Look, I talked about the fact that, all the namby-pamby liberal leftists are all worried about this and that and crying in their soup. Donald Trump is doing what he's supposed to be doing, but he's still got this one issue that is really starting to bother me, and that is the Supreme Court pick. So, Chris Hahn, what do you think of this guy, Gorsuch?
I think that he's got a great resume, but I think he's far to the right of the rest of the country, and I think he will be filibustered.
In what way? Before we get to the filibuster, what did he say that made you think he was far to the right?
He's got some opinions out there when he talks about personhood and when it begins. I feel like he's a real threat to Roe v. Wade and some other long-standing laws in this country. And I think for that reason, Democrats are going to filibuster him. Whether or not Mitch McConnell decides to destroy the filibuster or not, he will be filibustered.
You know what's interesting is I think he had an opportunity. I was mesmerized by the guy, I just got to tell you, and I'm not going to talk too long, but I just thought he had an opportunity on Roe versus Wade to kind of leave a question on the table. He seemed to say there ain't no question there. What do you say, Brad?
Well, as we've seen with other justices who we put up, they've said under oath that Roe v. Wade is a super precedent, and that is very hard to overturn. You need a constitutional amendment, and quite frankly, I don't see that happening anytime soon.
He seemed to say it's precedent. Okay,
sure.
So now the Dems are going to filibuster. Chris, why?
Well, let's also talk about how he almost always sides with employers over employees. The case of the truck driver leaving his freezing truck so he doesn't freeze to death. He sides with the trucking company. That's really extreme to most Americans.
He follows the law. That's what he does.
Yeah. Okay, let me ask you this. All right, before we get into the weeds on, the facts of the case, here's the problem.
Right.
They unanimously put him on the circuit court, which is one less than the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
What changed? Did he have a lobotomy and now all of a sudden they think he's a different guy?
I think that Congress changed. I think there's been a lot more. The Congress is now more partisan than it's ever been on judges, and that's the way it's going to be probably for the foreseeable future.
Elections have consequences,
Who
to
said
quote
that?
Barack Obama. And you want to know something? We're entitled to have an up or down vote on Judge Gorsuch.
So is Merrick Garland. We were entitled to an up or down vote on Merrick Garland.
No, we were following your rules, the Biden rule, that when an election is underway for president, then there wouldn't be a Supreme Court election.
The election wasn't underway.
That's an old argument. Let's not go there. That's an old argument. Each side has a lot of bad blood on this whole issue. Let's go forward. This guy has the judicial temperament, the intellect, the experience. I never saw a guy so attacked in my life, and you didn't get a rise out of it.
You know what? What? Unfortunately for him, he comes to the Congress as the Congress has been made very partisan by Mitch McConnell specifically.
Oh, of course.
And
not Harry Reid.
Conservatives on the right.
Harry Reid changed the rules, Chris. And guess what? We might have to use the Reid option and change them again. If you guys play Russian roulette instead of chess, right now we're exchanging a conservative for a conservative. You want to change the rules and maybe we get 2 more picks and maybe they're liberals. Then what happens?
He changed the rules. Harry Reid changed the rules after 5 years of intransigence by Republicans. They didn't allow any picks for anything. They were stopping functionaries in the Department of Transportation from being confirmed. They were ridiculous with their filibuster.
Here's the problem, guys. The viewer is listening, and they're saying each side is doing this. They're blaming the other side. We want business done.
Absolutely.
We want a full Supreme Court. This guy doesn't have a conviction or anybody waiting in the wings.
Casting.
What the president should do, Judge,
what?
The president could end this right now. Put up Merrick Garland, let the Senate vote him up or down, and see what happens.
You lost. Get over it. You
lost. Rise above it. Rise above it. You know, the Federalist.
You rise to the occasion and give us the vote that we're entitled to.
Okay,
That's
enough.
Here's the thing, Brad.
No, stop fighting with each other. I've had enough.
Okay.
All right, you saw that couple who was just here. How many parents do we have to parade in front of you to convince you that these mayors and liberal lefty governors and whoever they are with these sanctuary cities are creating criminal asylums for American citizens? This innocent 16-year-old, not quite 16-year-old.
Right.
Come on.
Couple of miles from where I'm sitting right now, my heart goes out to that family. Okay, and it really does. I think that what we have to determine in America is when we ask people where they're from. I think that's the divide here. I, for one, say when you're convicted of a felon, if you are here illegally, you should be deported after you serve your sentence. I'm not for saying where are you from, where are you here legally when you are picked up. I think that's the distinction that has to be made.
We don't need your sympathy. We need you to follow the law. We need cities who are sworn to uphold every law and every citizen. They can't pick and choose the laws they want. I say pick a city and make them an example, Judge. Pick a city and cause them pain.
Blakeman, Chris Hahn. I have a feeling this is going on for a long time. Thanks for being here, guys.
Thank you.
And Mark Stein is still ahead tonight. But next, he's usually part of our panel. But tonight I had something specific I wanted to ask American Conservative Union Chairman Matt Schlapp. You'll find out next.
He pushed back and got feisty with a reporter who he has a very good rapport with, I must say.
So I want to walk a fine line because I spent years sitting in that briefing room.
You don't tell other people what racism is. Yes, I do.
No, you don't.
Because you don't experience
it. You don't know what
this has nothing to do. You don't need to raise your voice because that's the kind of racism I'm talking about. You just raise your voice at someone who's simply disagreeing with you. You have interrupted me throughout this entire exchange, and rather than speaking respectfully and considerately, you raise your voice at me because you're uncomfortable. You're uncomfortable. You are uncomfortable at being spoken to by someone who doesn't agree with you and recognize that you don't know what you're talking.
That was CPAC Chair Matt Schlapp, a regular guest on Justice, trying to defend White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer on MSNBC as he was shouted down by Dr. Jason Johnson in an appearance on that station. So what's going on with all this left-wing anger? Matt's here to talk about it. All right, Matt, you know, I've been noticing lately that whenever the left is trying to make a point or thinks they're caught, they keep talking over someone on the right. And this person saying to you, I mean, I can't believe it, saying you don't get to tell, you know, you don't know what racism is. You don't get to tell what other people what racism. What was that about?
Yeah, it's okay for someone on the left
like this person to say that Sean Spicer is exhibiting racism, or that Steve Bannon is exhibiting racism, or that Donald Trump is a racist. That's fine for them to say. And then when I try to defend those people who I know and who are my friends and who I know are not racist, and I know their hearts, I'm told I'm not allowed to speak because I'm a white guy. It just gets so absurd. How are we going to have real discussions in this country if you can't talk because you come from a certain gender or race or class? It's absurd.
Right. And what it appears to me to be is that you have no right to speak because you're right, you're white, and you can't possibly know what this man knows, and therefore you don't have the right to have a free speech. And I'm seeing this more and more, even when we talk about Milo at Berkeley. If you're on the right, irrespective of the race issue, you don't have the right to speak. And we, the left liberals who have this, understanding of everyone and want to include everyone, want to shut down anyone who is on the right. It's crazy.
It is crazy. And what Milo experienced at Berkeley and what all these conservatives who go to college campuses, basically riots sometimes occur because people on campus seem to be so upset about the idea that someone would want to talk about free markets and the Constitution and your right to live your life as an individual. These are really radical ideas, Judge. And I think one thing that's happened in the last year is, we've all talked about what we all experienced being Trump supporters over the course of this election. And I think one thing happened with me is I'm not going to cower anymore on these issues. I used to avoid them because I felt like maybe I didn't have standing. Guess what? I'm not going to let them quiet me because they can't go out there and smear good people with these most horrible of terms and just terrible castigations. I'm not going to take it anymore.
And what they're doing is they're silencing people on the right by ostracizing them, by saying that I'm hypersensitive, I can't possibly hear this, and that person is a racist or a thug or a Nazi or whatever it is, and therefore we must not allow him to speak. I mean, this is contrary to the Constitution, and it is their way of being a bully, and they want to call Donald Trump a bully? Maybe he's got the right idea. Maybe you have to fight back and push back.
Well, I think that's what he's taught us is that, I don't always think you have to fight hard on everything. But on these really central foundational questions about what's in our heart and what's our intention, conservatives have to do a much more aggressive job of pushing back. Don't let them quiet you. Don't let them chill you. If you're a college kid on campus, don't let that administration shut you down or that college professor. In this case, it was a college professor trying to shut me down. And guess what? I'm not going to send my kids into those classrooms. I don't think it's doing our country any good.
And just so you know, Matt, I was on a campus, and these kids are afraid to admit that they have right-wing thoughts or that they support Trump. Anyway, Matt Schlapp, good to talk to you. Thanks for sharing that with us tonight.
Thanks,
and
Judge.
We're continuing this conversation in a minute with author and columnist Mark Steyn. Stay with us. More now on the left's angry attempts to silence the right. Name-calling, bullying, shaming, you name it. Let's keep the conversation going. And joining me now is conservative author Mark Steyn. All right, Mark, you were able to listen to Matt Schlapp and the fact that he was shouted down, something that is not at all unusual anymore, where people on the right are being, bullied, or where there are actual, attempts to burn down buildings, where members of the right are being invited to universities and then shut down. Is this something that you've seen in Europe?
Yeah, it's you see it in Canada, you see it in Britain, you see it in Australia, you see it in Europe. The left doesn't want to win the debate. They want to cancel the debate. They're not actually very good at debating, aside from these jingles they shout when they are confronted by a speaker whose arguments they can't counter. But increasingly, especially among the young, they don't even philosophically believe in free speech. They believe there's a correct position on certain issues, whether it's abortion or gay marriage or transgendered bathrooms or climate change or Islam. And the list of things on which there's a correct position gets longer and longer and longer. And they have less and less even even of a theoretical commitment to free speech or a diversity of views. They celebrate every diversity except the diversity that matters, which is diversity of thought.
And dialogue. And it seems as though you're not allowed to continue discussing your opinion. But, you know, there is something called American laws for American courts. And about 17 states in the United States have those laws. And they are, you know, pretty simple. I was a judge. I only applied American law in my court. I mean, I wouldn't think of applying any other. And just recently in Montana, there was an effort to create Sharia law or add Sharia law. And the Democrats called it shameful. And they said that banning Sharia law in Montana's courts is a horrible thing. And they said that it sends a dangerous message to minority groups. And they say that it is repugnant to have just American law in American courts. And they say that this is not who we are as Montanans. What?
Well, Montana is not going to be Montana, even if it goes for Sharia light. Sharia law is incompatible with U.S. law. It's incompatible with English common law. And in other Western nations, it's actually already got quite a foothold. The French government, for example, recognizes polygamous marriages among Muslims from the benefits of welfare. England has a lot of Sharia courts adjudicating on marriage and other domestic matters between Muslims, and it discriminates against women. And that should be a very basic thing. There are dozens of countries around the world where you can live under Sharia. There's no need for the United States to join an already long list.
All right.
And this kind of stealth Sharia is actually not a joke, Fred. It's actually quite a serious one.
And you know what's interesting is that they said it banned the application of foreign law in Montana's courts, but the debate was particularly focused on Sharia law. But but let's move on from that. I mean, what we are seeing now with these snowflakes that they call them on campuses, and some of the inability of students to be able to express themselves is what I see as a limit on free speech. Do you see free speech and the First Amendment being affected negatively as we go forward?
Oh, absolutely. The First Amendment counts for nothing on most American campuses. A majority of Democrats in Congress actually voted to constrain the First Amendment. They used to at least pretend to agree with Voltaire, that apocryphal bit of Voltaire about how I disagree with what you say, but I'll defend to the death your right to say it. Right. Now they'll actually put you in hospital if you try to say it, as they did with that professor at Middlebury.
Well, anyway, Mark Steyn, it's always good to have you on, Justice. Thanks so much for being with us tonight.
Thanks a lot, Judge.
All right. And we'll be right back. That's it for us tonight. Remember, friend me on Facebook, follow me on Twitter and on Instagram at Judge_Jeanine. And don't forget, my new show where you hear the case and you decide the verdict live. America decides it. You, the Jury, premieres on your local Fox affiliate April 7th at 9 p.m. That is this Friday. Don't forget it. I need you to watch. Thanks so much for watching. Greg Gutfeld is next. Good night, Mr. Calabash, wherever you are.